Hi, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving for those in the United States. From office hours, we are here. If you have more questions about what we're doing here, you can go to officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about all things media and virtual event related. And second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're just going to spend more time on more questions. So we're taking it a little slower. Tomorrow, we're going to brainstorm second hours. What should we be doing? We're really starting to tune those up, and so we want to hear from you as to what we should be covering. And then on Saturday, of course, is the long day. We have education at 8 o'clock. We don't broadcast that to YouTube, so you'll need to jump onto Zoom. And then at noon, if you're getting the emails from us, you'll see a link where you can jump in and join the Belfast method. The Belfast method is we're going to jump to the Accidental Theater, do a remote takeover of all their hardware, and run a show from all over the world. So it's pretty cool. All right, let's jump into the questions. Bill, what do we have?
Good morning and happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's in the U.S. watching this morning. TJ Asher is our first questioner and here on the panel often and a good friend of the show. It's the Thanksgiving holiday, he notes, in the U.S. What are you thankful for?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm thankful for tryptophan, Brylcreem, and especially ATEM Mini.
Go ahead, John.
Thankful for office hours. I've learned a lot. Thanks to Alex. Thanks to all you guys. And I have a great family, a great life. Thank you very much. Thanks to all.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm going to reflect pretty much exactly what was just said. This has been a revelation. I expected back when we first heard about lockdowns and things like that to go through a period where I was isolated. And it's because of office hours that I have felt the exact opposite of isolated. I've met more interesting, fabulous people through this show than I could have possibly imagined, and I appreciate each and every one of the hundreds that have come through my life on my computer screen. Thank you, Alex, for starting this because it's been magical.
Thank you. Sky?
Gonna get schmeepy, all teary and everything. No, it's just been fantastic. This past 19 months, 20 months of connecting with a whole new community in a whole new way and thriving in the midst of an experience. And again, to be thankful. We were given a great gift together to do a thing with Madeline Smithberg, and then to see that continue to expand and explore and empower. And it's just been, it is not looking backwards, but it is a wonderful experience.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I'd like to echo those sentiments, but I'd also like to thank David for giving us the live stream from the Macy's Parade.
Yes, thanks, David. That's great.
Awesome.
Go ahead, JJ.
Well, I'll start quicker. Thankful for my family, my wife and kids, but here I'm incredibly thankful for the sentiment of collaboration that makes this possible. Like new in the world, best in show, or best show, as it were. What this group of people constantly does every day in striving to make something that's better, and not just better in the technical sense, but learning how to collaborate and do that well. And finding that sentiment from all over the world, like that's part of the hope that sometimes we feel hopeless. I've felt hopeless about.
Paul? Can't hear you, Paul.
I'm just really thankful for all the great friendships on here, the people that have come to meet on here. Let me switch cameras. Just I feel like I know people here in depth. Yeah. And it's really been a boost in getting through the pandemic, building these friendships and these collaborations and all that. And then there's the technical knowledge, that I've acquired through here, with going from almost very low level to medium level now that I have an understanding of audio, video, and production and streaming and all that. Great show.
Guy?
Yeah, I try to do this every day. In fact, I don't try. I do, as Yoda would say, don't try, do, or do not. I write down what I'm thankful for. I just open up Apple Notes, and a lot of times it's health. Health is number one to me, because without that, you really don't have a whole lot. Oh, somebody just cut to the parade. Well, Did you spotlight the parade while I was talking?
Did you?
I did. Ken Jordan
He's
thought
not-
it would be appropriate.
He's not
but
thoughtful for. He's not thankful for that.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just interrupted my train of thought where I was going with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, family, the community. Last night we were able to, actually this morning with Manolo showing off some really interesting stuff that's pretty cutting edge. I was just really thankful to be able to see the future, like what Manolo's doing. You pay attention in Belfast Method. He's doing some really cool stuff. So yeah, so thanks everybody for your contributions here as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely thankful for my family and for the work that I get to do on a day-to-day basis, and definitely for this group. And I still just such a effortless thing to do. I've never had anything that was effortless to do every day for 600 and some times. And the times that I've missed, I've been frustrated, that I haven't been able to hang out with everyone here. And I just find that to be fascinating. And I do think that we're at the beginning of something that I think could really move the whole world. I was thinking about that this morning while we got up this morning. For those of you who came in a little late, I apologize. We got up this morning at the very beginning of office hours, and Todd Reynolds played a Simple Gift, for us on the violin, an amazing rendition. And I was just like, every once in a while, you just get this like, what have we created? This just amazing space, and we've got David Brady showing us the parade, and we're having this incredible conversation on a Thanksgiving morning. And it's just, it's way beyond anything that I had imagined when I said, oh, I'm going to, arrogantly, I'm going to show everyone how to do virtual events because they don't know how to do them. And I'm going to solve that right now. Like March 25th of 2020 was like, I got to figure out how to fix this because everyone's going to fail if I don't show them. And we very, very quickly, it became less about me, and every day it's less about me and more about us, and I love that, and I love the fact that I get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll have the speaker open or something. Manolo was showing something. He was showing like PTZ controllers, like building them in Universe. At 5 o'clock in the morning, people were just talking about it and going back and forth. And I was like, what in the what? And it was so cool, and, so anyway, it just keeps on getting, I feel like, there's always a risk that this will just fade out, and we should always be thankful for the moments that we have in this system because, we never know what will happen next. I mean, I've really lived through that many times in my life. But it does feel like, we're at the beginning of something, not at the end or the middle or anything else. You just start to see these seeds of creativity and tech, and people interacting in a way that I don't think this exists anywhere else in the world. I was really thinking about that this morning, that this really doesn't, people that are connected, because we have persistence. It doesn't matter where we live. It doesn't matter where we work, and we're constantly trading ideas. I mean, this, and we're not, caught up with any of those things. It's just a really special thing. So anyway, definitely thankful for it. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next, and he asks, if you wanted to make the $20,000 studio Belfast-capable, what considerations would need to be made and what equipment would need to be added?
Go ahead, JJ.
So I wasn't always an advocate of Meraki, but I really have started to love the facility with which one can create a VPN, and having folks that can connect in to the infrastructure. Number one consideration would be something you can put a easy VPN, and it can be either AWS cloud, but having Meraki on site that also allows load balancing. So for me, first consideration obviously is networking.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say internet is probably going to be one of the key factors here, and being able to connect up from multiple locations. The other thing is you probably want to consider some staffing into this $20,000 thing, since Belfast is a lot of volunteer, but I'm not 100% sure if it's 100% volunteer. Mm-hmm. And if you did anything similar to that, you might have to have somebody on staff to just take care of the equipment.
Go, Jonas.
You definitely need a local engineer, but what you also need is the equipment that you buy needs to work on the IP stack. Like if you buy something that works on a proprietary protocol over a protocol that doesn't work on the network, we can't Belfast it. So if you keep that in mind, and then a VPN server, 2 network connections, so if one fails, you can fail over to another one, and then keeping it as far away from content that really matters. Like if you have people remote into your system, you want your assets to be on another network that is not the network where everybody that needs to control a camera logs in, and keeping stuff separated for that purpose.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd say you're going to need a lot of knowledge with networking as far as how you want to open things up, because it's really dangerous to do like what I did last night, which was I was opening up ports for Jeffrey, and I was just like, I got to remember to close these back down because somebody could sniff through and have, it was basically go direct access to my machine. And so I would say knowledge and some way of either using Cloudflare or something like that to really keep people from packet sniffing and getting into your stuff. So there's a lot of security.
Why me?
I mean, I think that the future is what we're doing with Office Hours 2.0, where we are all those controls are happening through some kind of interconnection between apps that we control, and that way we don't need the VPN. I think we need the VPN right now. I think that I'm trying to get to a point where we we don't have a name for it yet, but we will create a name because names are good. So anyway, I know it drives everybody crazy, but the for the cooking thing that we're doing, that is designed from the ground up to not have any VPNs. So that's, like as we start to build that, and as Andy starts to work through it and helps me guide me along on through Isadora, our goal is no VPNs. So we're going to control 4 switchers total, maybe 5 switchers total, through a system without any VPNs. And right now, we may be using chat to do that through Zoom. We may end up using other things down the road if that doesn't work out to be as responsive as we need it to be. But I think that it sounds like it can be. But the point is that we want to, but what you do need is to make sure that all the hardware you have has a protocol that it can be controlled with. And it has those protocols, like what Blackmagic does, like what Behringer does, have to be deep. We have to have total control over everything that we need to do that. So so those are the things that we want to kind of think through, and whether that's OSC or REST or other protocols, we have to have those protocols, or we're not going to put that stuff into the system. All right, next question.
Comes from Jeffrey Powers here on the panel, and a long-time panelist here from Madison, Wisconsin. Last night on After Hours, Guy hosted an NDI Bridge session where we all controlled and hopefully not broke Guy's bird dog camera. Can Guy talk about what he learned from the session?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there was a couple things. There's a NDI section on Facebook, and a guy named Kane talks about some of the behind the scenes stuff, because I think he either works for New Tech or he has a connection there. He's a developer or something. And so I had learned that he said Parsec has the same kind of frame rate and feel that NDI Bridge does with KVM screen capture. So we tested that last night, and Dennis took control of my computer from the UK. Actually, no, we went up. He didn't have a compatible, he had an iMac Pro, and so he didn't have a compatible machine. So we wound up spinning up a instance in the cloud. And so he took control with his Mac over my cloud instance, which then took control of my computer, which is pretty interesting. The bird dog, the other thing that I learned is, so we got it's working again here. So what you're seeing is my Mac down below. And so what we were doing is just seeing if we could, control it remotely with the on-screen kind of PTZ controls. But then the other thing was I bought an Xbox controller, which you can see here. So now with the Xbox controller, I can move the camera around as well. Come on. Oh, I'm in the wrong window. Let me move my mouse back over. Come on, go. Now I broke it. Something might have happened when I moved my KVM.
Great.
Anyways, we had it working. It was just working 3 seconds ago. Anyways, I bought one of these to be able to do pan, tilt, and zoom with the like $79 Xbox controller via USB. But I want to be able to do it remotely and let other people remotely do this. So it's pretty cool that NDI Bridge is allowing you to see other people's networks. So we actually saw Jeffrey's camera. Actually, Jeffrey, you want to talk about what you were able to see on your end?
Yeah, absolutely. So NDI Bridge, when we connected, it connects everything. So I saw Guy's stuff. They saw my PTZ camera back there. They could connect to my PTZ camera and control it from there. It was very interesting, very eye opening. So as Guy talked about in the previous question with the security, that's one of the reasons why you want to really tie down your router just to make sure, because he also had to open up some ports to let things pass through. And yeah, it's definitely, and the KVM matching what Parsec or any of the other KVM systems do. It was just pretty amazing. The only issue, besides the fact that the bird dog stopped working, was if you tried to control a PTZ camera, I would hit the button to go left or right, and it would just go extreme left, extreme right. So there's still a little bit of work that needs to be done with that. And other than that, it was a really great item for free that you can download and install and use. And I can see a lot of great uses, from controlling a machine to controlling a camera and doing a lot of remote video work easily.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, a couple of things I noticed. One, I was amazed how responsive it was, with me remoted into a cloud instance that was then remoted into Guy's machine. And I was able to near real time control his camera that way. The other thing is that NDI need to get on and write their Mac software so I can run it natively.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question.
Sentiment, it looks like Sandir of India says, looking for a backup solution, looking to back up learning content, finished LMS modules, final audio and video files, project files, and related. Is chronosync a viable solution for a remote and distributed team?
Go ahead, Bill.
When I read this the first time, I thought about my workflow in video, and I've broken into three different things. The capture of the original footage is the most critical for backup, and whether or not you do it on a cloud service or you do it on hard drives, primary and secondary backup, and maybe even a tertiary backup to make sure your original assets aren't lost, that's one step. Then you've got the creation step, kind of a mezzanine step in the middle, where you're editing and putting together your show. And I've often made mistakes in that, thinking I had to save everything, including all the rendered files and everything else. And I blew up my storage in a lot of stuff that wasn't necessary, because it can be regenerated if you have the original footage and if you have all the files from your NLE or whatever you're using to create your content. Eventually you're going to get a master, and now you've got the master and you're trying to figure out how to back that up and make sure that your final program is secure and can't be lost. But if somebody comes back and says we need to make changes on it, you need to get back to that mezzanine stage in the middle. So for me, one of my big evolutions in thinking was to look at what files are generated by the system and can be regenerated, so I don't have to back up a lot of large temporary files in the middle of the process. You're looking, I think, mostly at the end in terms of chronosync and things like that on your final stage. But I had to think through all three of those stages of the process to feel like I was secure in not losing content that I didn't want to lose.
Yeah, one of the things that I do a lot of is, definitely keep everything, just absolutely everything that's connected except for render files. Like everything, and because I just never know when I'm gonna have to go back to it, and storage is a lot cheaper than time in my world. And so I'd rather just pay for the extra storage and have it there. The other thing though that I do is I collect projects. So when we're done and the client says, this is great, I'm done with this, I do a collection, and I do two collections. Like for Resolve recently, I've done these where I collect all the files with all the connected assets. Then I do one that clips all the files and, clips all the video so that there's plus or minus 15 frames on either side, and it just clips everything down. And that's a much smaller piece because it's not using the whole video assets. And I have both of those, and then I have every raw asset created for it, and so that what that means is that generally, if you just need to tweak something or re-render some section, you have this thing and it's light and you can send it to somebody. You have, if they really want to go into something, they have something else, and then there's this raw file that just has everything, and that has saved me recently that I keep that raw file. I have to admit that I'm getting back into post. We did a little bit of post in the last year, and I realized I was a little out of practice. And so naming conventions and file structures weren't as good as they would be. And I will say that now that my head's back around it, that's the big thing also, is just building your file structures and your naming conventions before you start the project, so that they all everything kind of locks in. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next. He says, would it be best to spec a mixer with built-in faders like the Allen Heath SQ Series, or a mix engine that could connect to any controller like the Allen Heath dLive? The price difference is about $4,032 US, but the dLive would not include a controller.
I generally like to have, as much as possible, I like to have the I/O separate in the engine separated from the controller. And the reason for that is that usually I want to put the I/O into some rack. Like I want to put that into a rack that is fed into it. Now I will say, to contradict that, we've used a lot of QL1s and QL5s, which a lot of the I/O goes in and out, but we tend to use Rio boxes with those, so that we can set that Rio box wherever it needs to be and just take an Ethernet cable back to us. And so those are the things that we kind of think through. Having it all built into the device creates a huge mess on the back end, and you have a lot of things that you're trying to get in and out of. So when you have a separate engine, you can now wire everything into a rack or into a fly kit, where there's just an Ethernet cable from your controller out to whatever you're using there. So that's generally my preference, is to not have that. In fact, most of what I buy for smaller kits are like little X32 racks, and then I get an X Touch or something like that to run them. And so that's kind of, anyway, my approach. Since no one else raised their hand, we're going to move on. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is up next. For live shows, since most equipment allows interconnectivity or triggering through MIDI over networks, could one easily program lighting scenes from Lightkey, for example? Wondering if it's still faster to program from a physical lighting console.
Go ahead, John.
This is a perfect question to lock, but I can tell, I know some LDs here in Las Vegas. They're all using the big light board still. And I run Lightkey here in my local universe here, and it's designed for a one universe system, no production. I wouldn't run it on production.
Yeah, I mean, I almost everything that I work on for larger projects are still grand MAs, that are generally, I mean, that's usually what I see on most of the projects that I'm working on. And but I don't, to the point, I don't know whether that's a historical thing. I think what's nice about it is it's really built for all those things, and it has all the analog interfaces. But the more I get into things like Isadora and other controls, and especially when people start designing stuff, which they can use these big boards for, but you start to wonder, when we're designing all of the cues against a click track or against time code, you start wondering whether you need the board. Like, the board is nice. What's nice about the board is you can organically move things to where they need to be and then set them, and set those states. But I when we're, so much of the stuff that I work on, you can't do anything during the show. Like, it is going to be the way it's going to be. And you could easily put that on a board, on an iPad, or a tablet that you just tap next, or you tap, I want this. So and I think that that's more of the future. But it's a scary future, because if it breaks, there's nowhere to go. That's why people stick with the boards, is that even if they're running the boards remotely with this software, they can still survive a show if it goes under, and that's where they still sit. Next question.
Comes from Jan in Canada. That's all it says. What is the best way to mix audio from devices with unbalanced outputs and avoid the electrical buzz or humming?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
You need to bridge from an unbalanced to a balanced line. I like to use the Henry Matchbox 2. It's a device that's bidirectional, so you can use RC in, XLRs out, but you must have some way of decoupling the electrical unbalanced with the balanced. If you're inventive and you like to twiddle with things, a Jensen transformer will do the trick. It's a passive device, and it will work just as well. But prepackaged, Henry's a good way to go.
Go ahead, Bill.
And if you want to do it in the field locally, I have a couple of these little guys. These come from Ceramonic. They're called a Smart Rig Plus DI, and they have a lightning connection on one end and XLR input on the other. It has a 9-volt battery in there and can provide phantom power if necessary. It's surprisingly clean, and I've been successful in using that for a couple of people and even up to 4 people for interviews, because each of this model has 2 inputs. There's one that also has a single input if you just want to do something simple.
Yeah, I mean, so if you're talking about like a scaled production, I think that to Mitchell's point, you want to get out of unbalanced as fast as humanly possible. Like, you know, like it's just, I mean, for me, usually the length of cable I'm willing to run unbalanced is about 6 inches. Yeah, 3 to 6 inches is about as far, with no power around it, you know, like in a really high quality cable. And then I get it into something that's going to immediately turn it to either Dante or to balanced audio. And balanced, even balanced cables. Now I'm probably a little on the extreme side, but I get queasy with balanced cables running more than 20 feet. And I generally try to avoid more than 6. You know, like, so I'm, you know, I want to get it into an IP, you know, into Dante or something else as fast as possible, just to avoid all the things that happen to those things. Now, what I will say about that is that, you know, digital, with great power comes great responsibility, and you can end up with all kinds of problems with digital that you don't have with analog, because analog is just dumb. It's just like I got electricity that goes from one side to the other. So, but figuring out where you step in to make that work makes sense. I know some audio folks, not in large scale ones, but kind of medium to small scale, that use car batteries. They literally build these inverters with like 8 car batteries, and they run their entire audio on that, so that they're not plugged into anything. like they're not, and they're like, I was like, how long would that last? And they're like, days. You know, like when the batteries are charged with the draw that their audio equipment has, they're like, we can run for days, and we just never have any buzz. And it's someone who just really couldn't take the buzz. So anyway, but getting it out of unbalanced super fast is really useful. And anytime you're using unbalanced, you should think to yourself, why am I doing this? Why have I gone down this insanity? Like when we had pod DIs are really popular in the event industry. So people, I'm gonna do a Playback Pro from my laptop, and I got a pod DI that's gonna convert it to, and I could just hear this little buzz, and I would just walk over to whoever's doing Playback Pro and unplug the pod DI and put a USB pre down and drop, you know, I have USB to XLR out, and it was gone. You know, like, and so, you know, figuring, like, you should always question, I have an unbalanced signal. Why, and how much does it cost to not have an unbalanced signal? Like, I don't have any unbalanced signals in my system. They are the devil. so get behind me. All right, next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia is up next. What's the best USB mic between $300 to $500 US?
Go ahead, John.
Paul's not at the ranch today. You're Mr. Shining Moment, Paul. The microphone that Paul has is the Shure MV7, which supposedly has the same capsule as the SM7B, which is a great capsule. This is a great mic because it has both XLR and USB, so you can grow with this microphone. It's probably the best USB mic that I've seen.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Ditto on John.
Yep. Go ahead, JJ.
I and a couple other folks have been using the Blue Yeti microphone for a lot of this, and the versatility is what I adore. That it has multiple different patterns you can use, so it's not just a single. I mean, not that those are single use, but it has multiple use cases for the Blue Yeti microphone.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I took a different tack on thinking about this question, because the mic you need is the mic that's right for the circumstances you're recording. For a panel discussion like this, where I can maintain in my studio a controlled environment a certain distance from the mic, these suggestions you've had so far are fabulous. They're great for this kind of podcasting circumstance. But the reason that there are thousands of different kinds of microphones is that this mic will not be good overhead on a boom, and another mic won't be good for doing a conference table. There are hundreds and hundreds of different approaches to capturing sounds. There are microphones for all of those things. So when you say the best USB mic, for the key is for what are you going to be recording, and are you going to be changing? Are you going to be recording at your desk today but need to take it out on the field to shoot with your camera tomorrow? You need 2 different kinds of mics to do that. That's just how it works.
Go ahead, Sky. Quick.
Yes, Mickey suggested the MV7, so this is what I am talking into, and yes, it was for this purpose, and it also has an XLR as well as USB C out, and it has controls, and I firmware updated it yesterday, so it's pretty smart. But yes, you can always add sound, but it's harder to take it away.
Yeah, and the MV7 has the XLR out as well, so so I think that it lets you grow with it. I think that probably as an all-in-one, it's probably the best. Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, that's not Selinsgrove. I was corrected on that. The Tricaster has more playout features than PlayoutBee alone. Since ATEM doesn't have these, is Softron the solution for ATEM workflows? Which version do folks like?
Go ahead, John.
So that's interesting because I have 3 different Tricasters in my life. You'd think I would have learned by now, but I've learned now. I run Playout Bee into the Tricaster, and I also have the it just flew out of my head. What's the playback device on the
Hyperdeck?
Hyperdeck. But you have to pet that thing to get it to work right. So
I think these are the brand new ones, right?
Brand new.
Yeah, we haven't had. Do you have a lot of network traffic?
No.
So we have a ton of Hyperdecks, and the reason we use them actually is because they've been rock solid since we started doing Office Hours 2.0. They've been a little less stable, so we're not sure exactly what's causing that. We think that there may be some network things that are connected to us sending lots of commands across the network, and so in JJ's,
they're still up and running. Actually, they've been fine
running
so
now.
far.
Okay,
Yep.
but we had an issue where all 10 of them just crashed, like at the same time. And when that happens, it's not a device. There's something they're connected to that is unhappy, and so we do think that the Hyperdeck may be sensitive to network control. That if there's something going on, I have a theory. It's not I have a theory, because I don't know if JJ's will agree with me or not. But I have a theory that there is that the Hyperdecks become less stable with lots of network traffic, and that they are sensitive to something there that we don't know about, because we've noticed it in the past, and almost every single time we've had a lot of things going on in the network. And so it's just something I'm starting to think that we need to isolate them, put them on their own VLAN or something that keeps them away from everything else. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the longer mine's on, the more chances are it's going to drop off the network, and it's generally not there when I want to use it, and that's a problem. The other problem I have is if you're using both outputs to create an alpha channel, they're not timed correctly. Mm-hmm. They just drift out of timing, and that's a problem.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
I can't speak to how it's implemented in the Hyperdeck, but from implementing the Hyperdeck protocol, it can be getting really chatty, especially if you have a lot of files and long file names on the disk, because it's transmitting all of those on every action. So there could be a weird thing where they start to overload themselves with all of that traffic. And if you have a feature that isn't in PlayoutBee but is in a Tricaster, you can message me and we'll
if
see
only we knew who the
that.
developer was. Yeah. So the we use, because we're doing 10-bit and key fill 10-bit output, we do use Softron on the air, and we love it. I mean, it works really, really well. It now has a Hyperdeck protocol, so we can fire it off from the switcher, and so it's been really good for us, and the company has been super helpful because there's been some pretty specific stuff that we needed, and so I would say that we're really happy with Softron on the air is the one that we're using, and again, it just there's almost no playout system that is anywhere remotely affordable that can do 10-bit key fill HDR, play out from with a Hyperdeck protocol with, it's a very unique thing on a Mac, so those things all kind of line up to, that's why we use the Softron on the air, and they've been a really good partner for that. Next question.
Next one comes to us from JJ McKenna here on the panel today, and he asks, what was the solution that Jonas created to fix the Mukana audio issue?
Go ahead, Jonas.
Basically, we had the issue of mixed content, which means because we put the Icecast servers at 090's location, and we didn't have an SSL certificate for that, and we can't get an SSL certificate for a Meraki-owned domain, obviously. We used one of my tunnels, and I think one of the things that I do for my clients is you can package them up in a little zip file. You send it to a person, tell them not to run the Cloudflare exit that overrides all your configs, and then run a bot, and that's it. And then it connects out to Cloudflare, because you can do all the setup, but it's basically a Cloudflare tunnel. And in the cloud, it gets an SSL certificate for one of my domains, and we're working on migrating that to one of your domains.
That's great. Thank you, JJ.
And I wanted to, again, point that out as one of the things I'm thankful for, like the collaboration that exists. TJ was working on this, Mickey, Hasmukh, and then Chris Peters was working on with me for like a day trying to figure out what was going on. And Jonas jumped in, and again, the collaboration of this group, thank you. You guys are awesome.
It's really a swarming group. Like there's some issue, and suddenly everyone just starts like latching on, and before you know it, we've all figured it out. We move on when we have that. We now have a new technique and a new knowledge that all of us have, and whatever was broken is fixed. So it's,
and I wanted to correct the attributions, because I got attributed for like making cables this morning. I didn't, and I'm just a bot. I'm just another robot.
Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles has our next question. He says, how do you use Playout Bee to do key fill into an ATEM Mini Extreme?
Go ahead, Jonas.
Who could answer that?
There isn't an easy process right now, but the process that works is either using OBS or vMix on the PC, and then you can import the output URL. There's a special one that supports alpha transparency of WebM files. And what you then can do is, why I have a Ultra Studio here, is if you plug an Ultra Studio in, vMix and OBS can output key fill from the Playout Bee alpha window out, and then you can loop it into your ATEM, and works quite well. You could also use Casper CG if you want to stay a little cheaper, but Casper CG is a bit more finicky with media codecs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Next question.
Back to Malaysia for another question from Danny Law. In need of an XLR female to Apple Lightning adapter, any recommendations for such an AD adapter that doesn't thin out the audio from it?
XLR. Oh, yeah. Yep, that's it. The Ceramonic does that. Yeah, Bill had already showed it to you. So yeah.
I've already been out there with it, but this thing does a really good job.
And I agree. I've used a ton of the Ceramonic stuff. They are a little sensitive to overmodulation, so you just want to be a little careful as you go in. They do not anti-alias well. So if you hit the ceiling, the chips aren't there to protect you from yourself. So be careful of it'll get crunchy. so that's what you get for that price point. But I don't know of anything other than, so I will tell you the bigger version of that we've used is a Lightning to USB with, so Lightning to USB and then a USB to a USB pre 2. So I mean, like, you can do that into so if you're looking at that, the Ceramonic is what we use on rigs that we carry around because it works well. The one we use for I need this to absolutely work in and out of an iPad or an iPhone is the converter to a USB A, and have that plugged into a USB pre 2 from Sound Devices. Now that is an $800 piece of hardware that is now tied into your system, but it's got limiters and all the control and everything else you need. So that's I'm not price sensitive. The Ceramonic is I am price sensitive and also portable sensitive to do that. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So IK Multimedia also makes a whole host of items, like the iRig series right here. I have the Duo IO, which brings in 2 XLR, a left and a right, or 2 mono, 2 stereo. It also can bring in MIDI if you needed to, and stuff like that. They have several different options for you. Yeah,
I have to come back to iRig and try them out again. I was an early adopter of iRig, and it was not successful. And so I haven't returned. And the more we talk about it, and when I saw their website, I was like, oh, I have to come back and see I'm sure that they've improved their circuits in the last decade. So I was, so I think that I need to take a look at that again. Next question.
Robert Pearson in McHenry, Illinois is up next. And he says, any suggestions on the best USB-C hub for a Mac Mini M1?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Let me think. 3 letters. Yeah. Oh, there it is. The OWC, anything they make is rock solid. This happens to be one of their more recent Thunderbolt docks that'll do USB-C and Thunderbolt 4. I'd pick up the back of it, but I got all my live plugins in the back there. And the only reason that front plug-in looks weird is it's got one of their Klingons on there that keeps the USB or the Thunderbolt cable from being pulled out. But I don't like the idea that I have to plug in from the front for the computer. It's just kind of messy.
Good, John.
Mitchell and I are in sync today. I have the same. I have the Thunderbolt 3 OWC dock on my M1. It's working like a champ.
Good, Jeffrey.
As an alternative, Pluggable, which is the box we've been talking about that'll actually bring in the 2 HDMI signals. They actually have a couple full docks that work really well. I haven't tested on the M1, but I have a Windows PC with Thunderbolt 4, and I've been using that. I'm assuming you're not needing the Thunderbolt 4 part because you said USB-C, but if you want to have a little bit more than that, that's a good alternative.
Yeah, I have to my iMac. I have the Thunderbolt 3 Pro dock, and then to my Mac Minis, I got these little Saatchi ones that fit the same form factor as the Mac Mini. They're a breakout, and they actually have an NVMe drive system. Although I'm having trouble with one of them right now. OWC has just released the same type of thing, or same form factor as the Mac Mini, but it has 4 Thunderbolts on the back, so it splits one Thunderbolt 4 out to 4 Thunderbolt outputs, which is pretty exciting. Next question.
JJ McKenna, San Rafael here on the panel. What network vulnerabilities exist in using applications to allow remote control of devices instead of using an intelligently configured firewall?
Go ahead, Jonas.
Exactly that issue. Like with the thing we did for the audio server, we're passing through whatever is hosted on the pod to the internet. It requires way more care to not expose the whole network, to expose the right elements. And what I found is difficult because a lot of software doesn't have a way how you can limit a specific user to a specific page or specific settings. So you still need to trust your persons that are remotely controlling it. And that's one of the reasons why Universe is so powerful, because you can limit people to, this is the function I want you to use, like controlling the PTC. We don't want you to reshade it because you think it looks too green. We just want you to control it. And that's one of the issues I found with remotely giving it away, that you can't say like, this part don't get, people always get the whole thing.
Go, JJ.
Yeah, one of the things we've been trying to reach is trying to figure out how to get more people involved. But most software isn't developed by security engineers or a firewall, folks who are network engineers. So that said, while we're trying to make it more accessible, moving away from a VPN, for me, I think is a VPN you can control. You can control and find out the people who are connected if you don't know what the IP address they're sourcing from at that particular time, versus software usually just opening the port to everyone. So like what the guy was mentioning, and actually what we were experiencing yesterday is we were asking the question, who's controlling the PTZ? Because it was just open to the whole world. Who's controlling the PTZ? So while I love the idea of finding new ways to collaborate together on a global fashion, moving away from VPNs, I don't think is the best idea, because you're just opening up your firewall. You're opening up your
But I mean, like literally,
infrastructure.
like, we're talking about running these switchers through the chat inside of Zoom. So with very specific protocols, it's only saying certain things. I don't know what it can do on the other end.
But you're connecting to the chat, and so people in the Zoom world could be. Yeah. Those packets that could be injected versus inspecting the packets on a firewall. Yeah, I'm just advocating for firewalls.
The problem really is it's just not scalable. The VPN. I mean, now I'm speaking as someone who's used VPNs to control hardware for a decade. Like this is what we did for Pixel Core. Every machine had a Meraki. You plugged it in. Every piece of hardware had its MAC address defined. The Meraki said, I see this MAC address, I will give you this IP, right? Every single piece of hardware that went out was like that. So I've lived in this VPN world for a very long time. But what I can say is, as we move towards, we want to bring anybody in, we want to do all these things. I can't keep configuring VPNs. And so it's not scalable to do that. What we do have to do we do have to scale permissions. Now we're experimenting with the chat. That's not where it's going to end up. Where it's going to, that's a thought experiment. Where it's going to end up is stuff that is much more controlled and sorted out as far as who gets access to what. But I really think that we're going to end up in a place. We need to be able to have a place where someone logs up and they turn this thing on, and then we can start sending very, very specific packets that are controls that don't have anything, can't do anything other than what they're doing, and so I think that the VPN process is not scalable. That's the what I have is that we're talking about doing a show here and there. I'm talking about what happens when we're doing thousands of shows with tens of thousands of participants, and how do they interact together and make it work. And there's just if you scale this idea, it doesn't work. So my whole thing is that we have to figure out a check-in, check-out process with. Anyway, I have thought about it. I have ideas. If anyway, it's a long story.
Can I add something real quick?
Yep.
Because I think an important step in the security is right now we are passing through the network itself. And I totally agree, JJ, that's like a way more unsecure way. But what I think what will be ending up is having applications on both ends and implementing the security in the application layer. So the end goal is not to tunnel everything out to Cloudflare and then serve it up there to everyone. The end goal is to have specific controls that then we can implement checksums, verify of licenses, hash values, all that we can then do. But I think the first step is to get it to work over just the network, and then we'll build small satellite applications that get deployed versus a VPN. And that will make it more secure then.
The last thought that I'll leave you with is biometrically backed persistent IDs. So that that's what's coming. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel says, when a client requests a drive with all the files used in a production, do you send them everything, including all the production elements?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, I had to jump in and set the scope of this because I'm having a bit of a crisis of conscience on this day of giving. There's some things I can't give. You can go along and not have a problem with a project being finished, and clients said, just pack everything up, put on a drive, and send it back to us. But sometimes you can't. If there are plugins involved in doing the production, you don't have the right to send the plugins to them. You don't have the rights to send them the fonts. You don't have the rights to send them the stock footage. You don't have the rights to send the music. And yet some clients insist that you must give them the rights to be able to use that, because then they can reuse it. That's not legal. So it's a bit of a dilemma. So that's the scope of the question.
Good, Bill.
And it is exactly the thing that everybody who creates content has struggled with, because yes, you're exactly right. I've worked in the corporate world mostly. Most of the contracts I sign with big companies specify that it's work for hire and they own the rights. And if you try to push back on that for anything, they have far more lawyers and far more money, and you're not going to be able to do it. So in general, in my practice, sure, I give you everything. The issue comes in, though, as you start getting a higher profile, your work as an editor or as somebody who wrote something can be taken later, and then an editor without maybe your skill set can turn it into something disastrous, and you can get connected to that. So if I do send out the work, I make it specific part of that please do not attribute this work to me forever from that point on, because I don't want to see my name as the editor of a thing that's trashy because they gave it to an intern and they hacked it to pieces. It is delicate because these are rights and creative content and the rest of that, but generally you're going to lose. So I just say, here's the drive. Call me if you need any suggestions. I want the relationship to be more important than the bits on a drive.
Go ahead, Alex.
I package, it happens quite rarely with my clients, but I do package everything up so that if they send the drive back to me, I can continue to work on it. So there may be a few things that I have that I can't give them. And unfortunately, they're not paying for stuff that I can't give them. So I make it so that if for some reason I don't have the drive anymore or my backups don't work, then they've got a copy. And then if they want me to help them get somebody else to do the work, then I'll have to say, well, you have to buy these products, these tools, these kind of things, because I couldn't, rights-wise, I couldn't put them on the drive. So it's related to this, but I'm just saying, you won't be able to, because it's true anyway. Even if I gave them everything, it would still take time for another editor or another person or another production company to take in what I did and then make whatever changes there are, do other things they want to do with them. So they might as well have that extra couple of hours of downloading those bits of rights footage that I can't include, or plugins that they haven't paid for. But it's just a small checklist, and so it's not too hard. So that's generally what I do.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I had one client that gave me everything. They gave me the fonts. They gave me everything that I needed to use to do what I needed to do. And then you just have to be very open with them as to what you're going to use. So if you're using some off the wall plugin, you say, hey, I got to do this. Just kind of make sure that it's stated that, they can't just give it over, because you can't even take licenses and just transfer it over. That's against the plugin's terms of service. So just by putting it in the contract, saying that there's certain things that are just not going to transfer over if you move it, that's going to be important.
You go ahead, Sky.
This often comes back from the photography world. Who owns the negative? And that's a contract that you make going in. But I heard a producer from New York. This was old days when tapes were the way you captured things. He said at the end of the project, he'd pack it all up into a banker's box. He'd hand it to that vice president, because then they are responsible for it and they will lose it. And he makes more money on the new reshoot when they want to come back and do something again.
That's funny. Yeah. One thing to keep in mind is that there is some contention with this as to whether it's true or not, but very, very large corporations in California don't want you to send them a drive. Or if they do, all of our drives that go out say, please return to us, right? Now, whether we get it back or not, we follow up and try to get it back and so on and so forth. Technically, we are lending you that hardware to move that content and then send it back to us. That is because if you don't, there is it hasn't been tested, but there is a strong belief that is a taxable event against the budget of the project. Let that sink in for a second. So if you do a $500,000 project, it's not the cost of the drive, it's the cost of the project. If you're delivering an asset that is that entire project back to them, now it's fine as long as you send them the data and they send it back. But if you give them a physical good, and we've been told by some corporations, do not send us a drive. Like, can you put that on an FTP site and let us download it, or we'll send us a drive and we'll send it back to you. But most large corporations will send it back to us immediately because they don't want to touch that piece of that's a hot thing. So in the United States, just keep that in mind, that's a whole nother ball of wax. Next question.
Next one comes from Alex 40 Goldner here in the panel from London in the UK. Office Hours 2.0 is set up to show multiple people on the screen when answering questions. Does this make sense if most often those people are going to be answering questions in order?
Go ahead, Alex.
This is really a trade-off between wanting to show something that's cool or hard to do, but it's good that we can do it through an automatic process, versus how good it makes the show. To the extent that if, say, for example, I'm the first person answering this question, and next to me on the screen are 3 other people who are kind of ready, but maybe not ready to actually answer the question, but then they've got to behave better because their faces are slightly larger on the screen. So I'm just wondering how you think about the story of the show and what needs to be on the screen from a storytelling point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I do think though that we want to have people not just kind of appear out of nowhere and ask that question. So setting the viewer up to see who's coming next, I think does make a difference. I also am hoping I haven't quite figured out the process, but in the back end, I'm also at some point for some questions, not all questions, I want to get to a point where we're not quite as mechanical about how we do it. Right now, the limitation of what we're doing at the moment is that I say who's going to answer the question, and each person says their thing, and I just go to the next person. My longer goal is, for some of the questions, is we get into a little round table and we all talk about it, and then we go back to what we were doing. So it's setting up for a future that doesn't exist yet. So that's, and I haven't quite figured out when to do that and how to do that, and because I have to figure out how to trigger that and tell you that we're doing that. And there's a whole bunch of things back and forth that we have to kind of figure out of when we're going to do it or how we're going to do it. But I'd like to make it more organic for the people who raise their hand to answer the question, that we're really having kind of a roundtable and talking about it and then moving on to the next question, as opposed to one person after the other. It's just that I don't have a mechanism. I haven't had time to really think about how we do that. So that's why it pops all of those up.
Yeah, because what we're going for is essentially we've got the graphics and the animation for that, and that's what we're showing. But it's a matter of where we go to a slightly different mode. So essentially, what happens is we will more often go to the one after the other mode, which could be people sliding across as they come. So it still requires some clever stuff in which you see the next person coming along, or once the previous person asked their point.
Right.
But you, I suppose, would have to, in the back end, what we would see is, do you want to be included in the round table if there's more than 2 people? And just say, oh, question, you've asked the question, say you would answer, do you want to be included in the round table? But it's up to you as the host to decide whether to do a round table or not. If you
and there's just there's a whole bunch of things I'm still trying to figure out with that. I think that I do have the opinion, not everyone agrees with me, but I do have the opinion that the quality of the answering has improved since we moved to the new system. That you're getting more information, and it's more relevant. But I feel like we did lose something there. There's some little spark there that we're not taking full advantage of yet, and so I'm pondering it. And you'll find that I ponder things for months. Like watching things, I just kind of think about them and watch them, and then I'll think of something and I'll ask Chris for some new button. But I don't like, there's that whole like how I invite. I've been thinking for 6 months about how do we invite panelists to the event, intelligent way for every day, so that we end up with no less than 16 and no more than 20. And that's.
One thing I was thinking was that maybe on the way there we could have a special source, which is anyone who's not actually put their hand up yet, who wants to kind of jump in, like essentially the Jeffrey Powers kind of source, if you see what I mean. Because, for instance, Jeffrey or somebody like that may sometimes like to jump in and make a kind of single moment comment. I don't know. It just feels that's one of the spark that we kind of missed out.
I will say, yeah, exactly. That's actually part of this. That's something that I don't like a ton. Like I don't like, I have to, in a more perfect situation, we can be responsive, but what I'd really like, and this is why I want to get into this thing where people can talk back and forth, is I would like to get us more to where the panelists are saying, I want to answer that question ahead of time. We get up there and we have a fixed piece, and it doesn't, and the problem is that even I do it, like I sit there and I understand why people do it. You're kind of seeing if people answer the question well enough, and then if they don't, or if you feel like you could add something that they haven't added, you raise your hand to kind of step into that as a response. But it's, from a show perspective, it's just difficult. Like it's and the hardest one, by the way, for the panelists is when I lock the questions and then people still want to say something, so they raise their hand. I'm like, I'm trying to move forward. As the host, you're like, oh my gosh, don't raise your hand. Because it's just like, we just need to, because part of it is that we want to, and this is like kind of almost a Sunday, so we'll say that. But part of it is that, we want to have a great show. We just have to be conscious to the fact that there are sometimes 200 or 300 people watching or listening at a time, and they may not be a portion of them may not be interested in this question. so we want to be conscious that we're going to dig into it, but that's why there's that little 2-minute counter at the top that goes pluses. We go into pluses. We're going to do it now, but we want to be conscious of, like, and what we need to, like, panelists to be conscious of is, when I see that counter now in the negatives, is what I'm about to say really important? And once we go into those negatives, anybody coming in should be meat only. Like it is, like, no spice, no wandering around, but like, what actually matters, in this process, because we just have a lot of people watching. We want to keep that in mind. That's all. Go ahead, Dennis.
So I think I like the build of the super source and the queue of people. When I'm cutting, I go to that when we're on the question, so you can see who's coming up. I think as the system improves and the builds are smoother, for example, when you switch to a new question at the moment, the answerers flash as it builds the thing up. And once that's eliminated, that will make it easier to stay on that source when you're moving from one question to another.
And I will say that what we don't want is to be on that super source when we move from one question to the other. So, I mean, what we want to be is back to some version of the question reader being up full screen, or me and the question reader being up full, or the host and the question reader being up full screen, and get off of that so that it can make its transition. And the other thing, as the host, I want the edit to go to full screen with the answerer. So I want the super source to be less apparent, like it's something that's changing and doing what it's doing. But I would vastly prefer the answerer to be full screen most of the time. So as soon as they start talking, then we do that, and then we go back to the super source, but we don't sit in the super source. And the reason for that is exactly what was stated earlier: is I can't look down. Well, I can right now because I'm ignoring it because it's a test, but I know that the problem is once this is a broadcast, as the host, I need to look down, and I can't look down because I'm now on air all the time. And it's a really, as the editor, it's really important you're not letting the people breathe when you do that. So I like the super source is something we come back to. Oh, we're going back to the next person, but we shouldn't sit in the super source. Yeah. The super source is something we hit for a couple seconds. The next person starts asking a question, and we jump to that, and we go one after the other. And I think that, and I do think it's important to see the other people that are coming up, because we may see that for a viewer, there's excitement created by, there's an audio question and Mickey is the third one. So I'm going to, I'm interested in that, like to see what these people say. And then I want to know what Mickey's going to say about this, or Jeff Francis or whatever that is in an audio section, or what is, we're now talking about some kind of infrastructure. What is Jonas going to say? Or YouTube question. What is Jeffrey going to say? Like all of those things. We want them to see the people that are lined up to that. And that's our easiest way to communicate that. And so I don't want it to just be the next person popping in, because I actually think that'll create viewer stress, of uncertainty. So I do like them stacked up, and I like the movement of them happening there. I would like to have a mode that didn't do that, a mode that didn't animate between them, so that we could do nicer. I would love to curve. I would love to round the edges of everybody's windows. It's just a little thing. Like I like rounded edges. So rounded corners. I think the rounded corners would be really nice, but I can't do that unless we go to a static super source. So I'd like a static super source mode to jump into. That right now we're stuck with something else because we can't do that. So anyway, go ahead, Mitchell.
There's another piece of this that's also just as important, and it's theatrical. Especially if we're getting cropped. Like my head right now is stuck in the center third and above and below a line. And if people are cockeyed or slightly out of it, or they look bored, it's all part of the showbiz here too. We need to entertain our viewers. And part of that means that some of us have experience on camera, some of us don't. But as I saw Sky applauding me, thank you, Sky. Sky has a very reactive face, and he's entertaining in his own way. So if he's one of the three in the three shot, and he's excited about what's being said, he shows it, and that becomes part of the thing. Right. So I'm saying, we need to, as good citizens of office hours, to be concerned with our theatrical presentation.
It is important for the panelists to be viewing the test stream that's coming out and really seeing how often they look down, how often they look away, how often they do that stuff. Because as we go into the broadcast, when we start doing this in January for real, like people need to know that when you're on, you're on. Like this is, like being a panelist, is a great, I think it's going to be a growing opportunity for people as far as, by contributing back to the community, people are going to be more and more well-known. We talk about this all the time, is that one of the advantages of being in the panelist, other than getting to know everybody, is that we know you, and, people hire people that they know, they will work for people they know, they'll help people they know, they'll collaborate with people they know. And so there's a real opportunity for the panelists, but the panelists are going to have to know that we're about to move the bar up a bit, and it's not, and so that's the thing that we just need to know, that when we're on, like if you're going to join, you need to be like ready to be centered, ready to be framed into the little frame that the Fenwick frame, and it's not the Fenwick, it's the Fenwick frame. It's a different term. So, but you have to be in the Fenwick frame to do this so that it looks good. But I will say that overall, I mean, we're moving towards the graphics. The lower thirds are a little big right now, but we'll. I don't think we need I don't think we need the date or the number of votes or the time on it. But I think if we once we compress that, we'll pull it down a little bit, and then it'll start coming out. And I think that we're getting to a point where it starts to feel like broadcast. And I think by the end of December, it's going to really feel like broadcast. I think that the graphics team is doing a great job at moving that down the path. And I think that as we get closer to that, I'm pretty competitive. So I want it to, over time, look like anything else you'd see on TV. And the fact that we're doing that over Zoom, on a shoestring budget will be, we'll get a lot of attention, and then that, kind of keeps folding into itself. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So lots of great stuff here, and but the big thing I was going to talk about was what I like about this whole system is just the fact that I can make my picks and choices. I can then figure out the words that I'm going to say after those picks and choices. I can do a little bit of research to make sure I'm saying the right word or the right thing, because sometimes you're in the moment and you're saying something and you say white and everybody says, oh, you mean black. Okay, that was just a small mistake. So what I've been doing with a lot of my questions, you can kind of see it on the other side of the camera. This is for an upcoming question that I have my hand raised for. I'll have a series of little bookmarks, little footnotes that'll be that I can use so I can remember to stay on track, because even the question before where I completely forgot to add one thing to what I said. I wanted to say that again, but by that point the questions were locked, and I couldn't add the one extra thing was with the NDI Bridge. So it's great to get my thoughts in order. So if I need to do it on the fly, I've kind of scripted myself, and I can figure out the right words to say on the fly.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from Stan Chan in Roseville, and he asks, how much does 10-bit 8+2 FRC versus 10-bit color on an HDR monitor matter when working with HDR videos?
Yeah, so that's 10-bit video versus 8-bit plus frame rate control. And so what they do is they try to use the fact that they have a higher refresh rate to show more colors. At least that's my understanding of it. The issue is I think you'll still see posterization within the 8-bit, because the 8-bit is the 8-bit. So you can play with it, but I don't think it's going to fix posterization issues within the 8-bit. So I would say that for a professional, for a consumer, maybe, but for a professional, I would say you absolutely need 10-bit instead of 8-bit FRC. I don't think that that's a valid. And I will admit that I've only read about 8-bit FRC because I don't do any critical work on anything less than a 10-bit display. So I don't know enough about it to know it other than what I've read. So that's my 2 cents. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Mitch Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, and he asks, walk-up or regular mouse for editing?
Go ahead, Alex.
To be contrary, a trackpad. I use a trackpad because I used to go out on events all the time, and I didn't want to be in trouble if I suddenly couldn't find a mouse or there's a problem with the mouse. But every laptop has a trackpad built into it. So I just got used to using trackpads, and they do have some nice shortcuts in terms of gestures as well. Obviously, they're available on the Magic Mouse, but I'm used to a trackpad now. So I'm kind of sorted for if I have technical problems with my laptop if I'm on site.
Go ahead, Sky.
I've been on a Wacom tablet, not a Cintiq, which is a monitor, but the tablet came from the Avid DS because the interface was so small. Consequently, I also, prior to that, was on a track ball, which is an upside down mouse, because my carpal tunnel in my finger of clicking an Avid for so long, we just started, swelling up. And so just to be able to have a pin to do a sweeping movement and also interact with the screen and the UI, you don't need as big as one as this. In fact, I make this screen smaller, but the Wacom tablet has been a great aid and tool for me.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
For me, it depends on what I'm doing. For any type of Photoshop, yeah, I'll go to the pen, and I use a screen. I don't use a Wacom. And then, of course, for a lot of the other editing, I'll use a mouse for that, and I'll use the touch screen as I go. And then, of course, if I'm doing any type of switching, I'll use my Stream Deck, because that's the tool for the job.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, sorry, my screen just popped out for the first time.
You've never seen that before. Yeah, I
Never
made you.
seen that.
I gave you the reader view. That's yeah.
Okay. I shrink my window so that I can.
Do you want me to turn that off?
Zoom.
I can
Yeah,
I can unselect.
that's
you.
huge. Well, actually, that might be helpful if I look this way.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and read this one and switch back.
Okay.
Douglas Carmichael asks, why do you think CES is clinging to the traditional in-person model despite the challenges of in-person events in this era?
Go ahead, John.
Sorry about that. I missed my mute button.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very complex question. This is billions of dollars for the Las Vegas community, this event, and huge amount of pressure from Las Vegas Convention Authority for these events to come back. And so it's all about the money.
Oh yeah, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree. First of all, I'm going to say, and you can shame me afterwards if it doesn't happen, but CES will happen in person. Unless some major variant comes out that changes the whole game. I've already been to a conference that works where everybody's been masked up, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to happen, no matter who cancels and stays. But for that, what John said, it's part of their core business. That's what they built their business around. There's contracts with the city, there's contracts with the convention center, there's contracts with the hotels, and all of them lose out big time if the convention cancels. And bottom line is, if CES doesn't do it, somebody else will.
I don't know if someone else will. Like, I think that what CES is worried about is not somebody else will do it. I think that what they're worried about is no one else will do it. I think that what convention folks, and I've had some conversations with some of them, their biggest fear is that people's behavior is changing. So, we were caught up in a whole lot of behaviors of how we do things and what we go to and what we do. I will argue that the AJA and then especially the Parsec hour last week is the beginning of the next thing. Which is, I can't have that conversation at CES or IBC or NAB. I learned more about Parsec in, 50 minutes than I had, had any chance of learning at any convention ever or video, And so the thing is that the behaviors are, and you're just going to see me we're going to be turning that knob up, as we start to bring more and more vendors in. And so I think that, I don't know if it's us, but what I'm saying is that companies, when they start, there's this kind of the emperor has no clothes syndrome going on with conventions. They're a waste of money. Like, they're a huge waste of money. They're just funneling money into the ground. Like you're just like, if there was a giant, virtual toilet, you're just pouring all that cash into the ground. Like, they are so ineffective at what they do, and so the thing is that they, but they did them. We did them all because that was a way before media, before other things like that. That was the only way for us to get a hold of these people, was to give them a place to go. But they're an incredibly inefficient spend. Incredibly inefficient. But you have all these people that are holding on to that inefficiency because it's their livelihood. It's the event teams at the companies. It's the event companies that want to do this stuff. It's some people who want to, I use those spaces a lot as press. I use them all, but I very quickly, and I've been as press going to these things for 20 years, I mostly realized that all I really wanted was PepCom. PepCom and CES Unveiled and all those ones. I did not want to go to if everything I needed was in those little venues, as a press person, I'd be happy, because I don't want to walk all of the South Hall, and so anyway, and it's all noisy and I can't get a good camera and, all this other stuff. So the thing is that you started realizing that this isn't really working. And when you understand the cost of a 40 by 40 booth fully staffed is like $5 to $7 million. Every time once I started building studios for companies, whether we were building studios for, Salesforce or Google or Facebook or whatever, you'd start realizing I knew what the costs were for building a studio so that you could interact with your audience directly, and the cost of going to a convention. And I was like, you guys are crazy. Like you are nuts. Like the thing is you could be interacting with them, your audience, your constituents and your partners every day. There is no way that you're going to make up for that in a conference. So the thing is that this has been insanity for at least a couple of years as videos started to pop up. But now what they're afraid of is the behavior is starting to figure out, like companies are building this stuff and companies aren't going because their sales didn't change. I mean, that's what some companies are talking about is, we're selling as much product without the conventions as we were with the conventions. And that terrifies convention, folks, is because, they can't figure out what to do there. So that's I think that what they're afraid of is behavioral change, that people aren't going to come back ever. And I think that that's most likely, I mean, we're probably looking at the beginning of the end of the convention as a model. Probably, I'd be surprised that, I mean, from five years from now, I'd be surprised if we see CES. I don't think it's going to survive more than 5 more years. I just don't think that I think its time has ended.
Comdex was the precursor to that.
Yep.
I mean, that's writing on the wall.
Yeah. It's just that it just ceases to be like people. And what's happened is people have realized, like, as if a company built their own studio and started doing real content, answering questions, being, interacting and having people learn this stuff, the price of one convention, and some of these companies go to 5 or 6, the price of one of those conventions to build that studio and staff it, by the way, like they could, they're going to get way more return in the long run than they'd ever get going to these silly things. And it just, again, it's been kind of a, you go to the tech talks that they have at these conventions and they're just worthless. There are a bunch of vendors up there talking about stuff and selling their thing. And every once in a while you get like one little diamond from somebody who's talking about something that's worth it, but for the most part, 80% of the conference content is worthless and and not something you couldn't, again, have online on Zoom. Like there's no reason, when I was part of that roundtable, for the Final Cut thing, or part of the roundtable the week before for Streaming Media West, and I was like, and I told Streaming Media West flat out I wasn't going to, like when it was going to be physical, I was like, I'm not coming. Like if you want me to be there, I just need to come over Zoom, and so I think that because I just don't think it's useful. I don't think it's a useful part of my time, so I think that these are in big trouble. I give CES 50-50 at best. I think we're going to continue to see a spike, and it has, it's not a new variant. It's the fact that the vaccines are falling apart, and so the thing is that people aren't going to get the boosters over Christmas, and it's going to be, a mess. And I don't think I think it's specifically sensitive for CES because there's a 90% chance that they were the super spreader. Like CES in 2020 is what created COVID. Like, not created it, but amplified the whole thing. You had a bunch of Chinese vendors that all came in from China and a whole bunch of people, and suddenly it exploded. Like if you look at the timeline of the CES 2020, and I do not think that if there's anything going on, I do not think they want that kind of press, and because all of us know that's, because a lot of us were seeing it coming. We were like, we're not going. I was like, the first CES I missed in 15 years was 2020. Cause I was like, that's all kinds of trouble. Go ahead, Alex.
That's true. I agree with in terms of the economics of the people putting on the show, the people attending, in terms of booths and stuff like that, and also private meetings. But for me, as an individual networking freelancer, the last time I had a useful conversation with anybody from Apple was in 2018, I think, at NAB. It was because they didn't have their kind of silent keeper in the corner who is watching everything that they're saying. They were actually, and also to look somebody right in the eye and to actually be with someone in terms of the emotional, personal aspect of it means that I can actually have a much deeper connection with the person I was talking to. But that doesn't mean now that I can get on a Zoom call or talk to anybody in the Final Cut Pro Motion team now, because they can easily say no to me, and they can easily say, well, this doesn't fit into our structures and our formal way of doing things in terms of communication and networking and feedback. So I don't know. This is the kind of,
I think the thing is that you're arguing for why they wouldn't want to go. you have as a company, you have the opportunity to outreach to a lot of people, but you also have the ability to more tightly control your message, and so you're arguing for why not to go to convention, conferences. I know that you want to do it. I'm just saying that as a company, most of the companies don't want that. What they want to know is, how do I, keep the conversation going in the direction that I'm interested in having it.
But they may not get that spark They may not get the spark of interaction of individual people actually being able to talk honestly to each other just for a few minutes when they meet, or when the person says, I need to go and get, this is the person you need to go and talk to. They're just a few yards away, or I'm going to be seeing them in a few minutes, come and join me and walk with me. And that, of course, is good for individual development, and making plans for the future and making inspirational changes to apps and services, but it's not so good, obviously, for the status quo in the case of Apple or anybody.
I think getting change out of large corporations has a lot to. It's worth studying Aikido. You know, it's not a Aikido is a better that you keep moving in the same direction, but then you change the you know. I think that a lot of times people want to do something that's much more aggressive and upfront, and I find that generally you get more done. At least that's what I've found over the last couple decades, is to do it softly. You know, so I you know, I think a lot of those things you have a lot of people have a lot of access to. Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's so true what you said about a diamond in a long, drawn-out technical dissertation by company representatives, or sales weasels, as I like to refer to them. But for me, all the years that I've gone to NAB, the best things that happened with the small room invites you got to go see some new thing or talk to somebody one-on-one. I remember talking to Sony and Philips way before they announced the CD-ROM or the CD disc, and it was shocking and amazing, and I took away something from that. So I guess the point is that where we're all leading is the NAB just sort of evolved beyond its need, and perhaps it's small gathering.
I'm not saying that there's no use. I'm just saying that I don't think that the ROI is there. Like it's that there's not the level of return of investment that's capable somewhere else. But I do agree with you that there's some value to it. I mean, the biggest value I got out of it was what we used to joke as you take folks out from the company out for dinner and drinks, and we used to joke it was called beer boarding. It's like waterboarding except with beer, and you know, you get, you know, the thing is you drink a lot slower than they do, and then you start pumping them from information about what the next year is going to be like. And there was one engineer at Electric Image that was so good. We would just know everything about electric, and we wouldn't say anything because it was, you know, we just wanted to know what was going on. But he was always the one we would take out drinking because we would get all the information that we needed. But that was the most useful thing that we did at most of these conferences. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's been said. I was at that CES event, and it definitely was the super spreader event. I have pictures looking back at it where I was looking at gimbals, and I was taking I had a Panasonic S1H at the time, and I had it over my shoulder, and I put it on a gimbal, and the picture is my face, like almost right in front of her face, and it was like 20% Chinese there. And I go through the Chinese halls because I was looking for OEM stuff.
They're the coolest halls. Here's the thing: is that the Chinese halls are the best part of CES, except for Pepcom and CES Unveiled. But I mean, other than that, the Chinese halls are where you see the next thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I saw the Stream Deck for what became the Stream Deck, and there's a lot of interesting things like AI chips where you see the technology of like putting bounding boxes around somebody's face and IDing them, and male, female, and it's happening super fast. And I'm like, whoa, this isn't here yet, but you're seeing a sneak peek what's going to happen in a couple of years. So I'll miss, like, you know, the NDAs getting, you know, kind of pushed into another hotel room to see something behind the scenes. I think that it's just going to have to play out. People are going to travel. They're going to say this sucks, and I don't miss being shoehorned in a tube flying through the sky and being tired coming back from New York, you know, a couple times a week, where you need a day to catch back up, when I could have just made it a Zoom meeting.
And I think that the other thing is that we have the opportunity to do this all the time now. Like, that's what we're building up here, and as we make Office Hours 2.0 look more and more like broadcast, that makes it easier and easier and easier for those. And we show that we're not going to fill their coffers with gotcha questions. You know, that's like, we just want to learn about the product. We're not trying to corner them. We're not trying to do anything else. That is an incredible opportunity for vendors, you know, to get out in front of it. And as our viewership, the quality gets notched up, then the viewership increases. You know, we can be doing this rather than having to wait for every April and every September to learn about new products. We can be just doing it every week, every day, you know, and just start stacking up, you know, those demonstrations. And to your point, like, again, Monday, 2:00 Pacific Standard Time is a good time for us to show up. It's not quite an NDA experience, but it's a good one. So after hours will be useful. So, and that's when you're going to really see the future of those kind of conversations where we're having conversations that mean something that will affect things that may not be publicly available, but are something that's useful. So I think that there's just a different way to do that. I think that the fact that Zoom has lots of security features and so on and so forth means that you can get very close. You can get probably almost as private as you would have gotten in a dinner, in Zoom in a lot of ways if you turn up all the knobs. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think that vendors, if coming on our show, may find that they learn more in that hour that they spend with us in presenting their product and getting fair answers, and again, not loaded questions, might show them that this is a better way to show things off. So this might be a rite of passage for them.
I mean, my hope is that vendors start to pick up speed and show up in a studio, like show up in our show prepared to actually show their product, as opposed to what, we're still in that pregnant stage of it, not them showing up with their laptops and, the other stuff that happens. And so I'm pushing more and more and more to encourage folks that we're bringing on, like, hey, there's people with a lot of really good equipment here. You need to up your game. And as we get into January, it's going to be like, I need to see you. As we go into January, I'm going to want to see the vendor and just be able to tell them, no, I can't have you on because you don't have what it takes to be on the show. That's the next step of that. And the key is to increase the quality of what we're doing, which we're getting, very close to. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Alex 40 Golner in London, UK, and he says, what features would you like Motion 5 to have to make it work for streaming event graphics?
Live output. I mean, that would be, that would be a thing that would be useful. But I think that for the ATEM, it would be great if compressor was able to export a TGA file that is not straight alpha. So the compressor now with the newest version of Motion will not do the compressed version of TGAs, which wasn't working. It'll do the uncompressed version, but the alpha channel is set to straight alpha instead of pre-multiplied, and that means that it doesn't work on an ATEM. So anyway, so the little issue there of just being able to have a little button in compressor, or well, in a perfect world, Motion would be able to export just export the TGAs on its own. But I understand that it might just have to keep on going through compressor. It's not that big of a deal. Other things like being able to import lighting, import a reflection map into Motion. Right now, you can define a lot of reflection maps for the text, but for some reason you can't do that for the USDZ models. And I think I haven't had time to test it. I actually maybe tested it this weekend. I think that you can go into the package, and I think I found the reflection map that they use. And I think if I replace it with something that's identical, I'm going to test that actually this weekend. It may just, and as soon as I know where that is, I'll just build a script that just replaces it with whatever I want it to do. But anyway, so that's, being able to do that. Have all the USDZ models need to have all the same attributes as the text does to the rendering, and all the access to all the surfacing would be super useful to me. How about you, Alex?
Well, I mean, from what people said here, from Jonas, it would be nice if I'd be able to export WebM from Motion or compressor. It's kind of the same thing effectively, because Motion and Final Cut have got a copy of compressor inside. So once compressor can do it, then these apps can do it. I, of course, like the idea of being able to use Motion as a tool for doing things on the hoof and live, typing things straight into a separate window and then going straight, updating graphics, because it's very good as a live animation tool. Now, of course, only yesterday did I even hear about ProPresenter, but in theory, ProPresenter is kind of the thing that I shouldn't really be forcing Motion to become something else, just like I don't want to force it to become After Effects or anything. So maybe I'm actually really thinking of what Fusion should do. So if Blackmagic want to get Fusion to control an ATEM switcher, imagine if the Fusion was actually supplying a graphics feed to it, as well as being able to choose the feeds and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, true frame sync is not what Motion does. It's not what a lot of these things do. And that's the problem that you have, is that it's one thing to play back mostly 30 frames a second. It's another thing to play back 2997 every single frame, every single time. And that's the thing that playout systems, whether it's Playout Bee or a Softron or everything else, is challenged with. You can't drop a frame. Like like you can't, like, as soon as any production person sees a drop frame, they're like, I can't use this playback system anymore. Like as soon as we see a drop frame, we're like, nope. Because it's, and it is a brutal, because we just, we have to explain that to clients, and so the number one thing that a playout system has to do is not lose a frame. And I don't think that, motion, as soon as it has the same problem that video. And by the way, this is why people like me won't use vMix or Tricasters or anything else, because they lose frames. You know what's wrong with the DDR and Tricaster? It loses frames. It loses audio sync. It loses all kinds. It's worthless. And so like, you can use a Tricaster, and it's great to have lots of those MIDIs. You just can't. Every editor that I know that's using on anything that's of any size just says don't use the DDRs. So because they don't rely, they can't rely on them. And so so I think that motion will have I think that's an engineering project that Apple. I think it's a waste of time for Apple to go down that engineering project, because it'll be so much work, and so few people will use it. Whereas I think that, I think that motion is an incredibly important application. $50 app that can do what it does. I wish that, my only thing is that I wish that all the keynote transitions should be behaviors inside of motion, and many of motion's tools should be in Keynote. And I think you've said this before, Alex, is that I think you should be able to export a Keynote document to motion and then keep going. Like, what Keynote's missing is keyframes, and what motion's missing is all the stuff that has all the little automated things in Keynote. And I've done things where I've almost finished a project in Keynote that there was a test for what I'm going to do in motion. And then the client says, yes, now I got to rebuild the whole thing, and it would be nice to just not do that.
Also, we need people to actually be able to understand motion a lot better. Because if you're really good at Keynote, and you go, and they go into motion, don't know what behaviors are, and they don't know what this and that is, and then they just open up their file, oh, okay, so I know really how to make a Keynote sing. So now I understand how motion works from a point of view of behaviors and the core of what motion is.
By the way, I think that, just saying that anybody who built a group of plugins that were basically the Keynote replications, just did exactly what Keynote does, except for motion, that'd be a good model. I'm just saying that would be really, really useful. I bet you could do that. Anyway, next question.
Next one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, last night, Guy had a PTZ camera set up in After Hours that could be controlled from Zoom. How is that control implemented?
Go ahead, Guy.
That was through Zoom's built-in request camera control feature. If you have a UVC compatible camera and the meeting setting is turned on to allow what they call far end control. So far end means somebody else in the meeting can right click on that user's screen box in Zoom and say request camera control and take it over. So normally a user would have to grant that permission and say, like, okay, I have a Brio, go ahead and frame me up. And you have to say, okay, well, with a Zoom room, you can actually say automatically accept requests for far end control. So I stuck a Zoom room in our studio. We grabbed a mannequin that we had laying around and kind of made a little set. And the idea is to let people control cameras remotely. And eventually I'd love to put some higher end cameras in there, not quite as in-depth as what Bonolo's doing. Well, maybe. I might have to catch up with them there. I guess there's a sale on Universe this Friday. So for those of you looking for a Black Friday deal, go look at Universe. I think it's 30% off, but I'm going to start playing with that. But that's all it was just a PTZ camera and that has UVC control with a Zoom room.
Next question.
Next one's coming in from Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, Louisiana, and he says, can Jonas recommend a good tutorial for setting up Cloudflare tunnels?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I don't think there's any. One of the issues right now is that they updated the software and forgot to update the documentation partially. So I'm going to write something down and post it in Discord, or we should do a lab in
I was going to say,
After Hours or something.
Do you feel like doing a lab, Jonas? Maybe in a couple weeks?
Sure.
Okay, we'll trade notes. We'll find a good time for you. That'd be great. Next question.
Alex Golner in London, UK says, I see that Shutter Encoder will convert ProRes 4x4 to WebM. How well does this work?
I don't know, but it looks great. I was looking at the website. Have you played with this at all, Alex?
No, I only just, I mean, Jonas mentioned WebM as being a thing that's good for, I think, was it OBS or something?
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, okay, well, I better do a search and see what can produce it, what it can work with.
We should test it. Yeah, Jonas?
One of the things that I found with encoders that claim to do WebM and then they don't actually do the alpha. So that's something to look out for if they actually encode it in WebM profile 2, which can have the alpha transparency, because otherwise WebM isn't that great.
Strange thing is, the actual website itself for Shutter Encoder doesn't mention WebM on the main page. It's just that I saw it in other forums saying this is what I used to do it. But the only reason why they got it wrong is because they didn't actually turn the alpha on when they were making the prairies.
Right. Yeah. So it seems like it's definitely worth testing, because that could solve a lot of issues if there's an easy way for us to make that conversion. Is there any other way, Jonas, to do that, to make the conversion to WebM?
I use Adobe Media Encoder with a plugin, or I do it in FFmpeg.
Oh, yeah. FFmpeg. There you go. Which is probably what this sits on top of. Most of these are interfaces to FFmpeg, which is why they're free, by the way, is because they can't charge for them. Or they could, but it would be expensive. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, if you plan on remotely mixing live events from your studio, would a universal control service work best, or would a specific console be a better choice?
Good, Sky.
Whatever console that you're most familiar with, it's your tool, and you're the one that's going to need to do a thing at a certain moment. And if you need to know where that, or if you're looking for where that button is, that's maybe not the best console for you unless you practice and practice and practice. So I don't think there is a perfect tool. It's the tool that you have in your hand in the moment that you need it to accomplish a thing.
Yeah, and when you're remotely mixing those events, there's a couple different ways to do that, which we're dealing with a lot. Is you can either be listening to it at a relatively low latency, and there's different, like for instance, really low latency. If you're doing stereo, is like a barracks. You have hardware on both ends. You can get down to about 12 milliseconds on that, and so you can be listening at very low latency and then controlling the far board. That has some stability advantages that if you lose connection, the show doesn't end. The other way we're looking at it is using basically where we do source connect or Unity Connect to your location, have you mix it, send it back, and feed it back in. While that may seem like a long round trip, remember that we're delaying our audio by 120 to 150 milliseconds almost all the time. So we've got that's an eternity for audio over the internet. So we have a lot of time to go to somewhere else in the world and bring it back and still feed it in on time. So those are two different ways to kind of approach that. Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston asks, if an office hours panelist needs to step away from for a minute to refill water or bio break, is it better to turn off video or leave an empty chair?
Turn off video. To turn off video in the Zoom interface is better, because otherwise it shows up in our panel. So if you leave an empty, and the other thing to know that I've been light-handed on as we go into it, but as we keep on moving forward, it's going to be more and more important for panelists to remain attentive. Like I'm going to be less sensitive to it, but not look like they're doing something else. Like definitely not looking like they're eating or talking on the phone or talking on another event. Like that'll be as we go into the get ready for January, that'll be we're not going to put you on anymore if you do that. So we're so you really can't do other things other than be here and be present. Looking down is fine because we're looking at things, we're trying to search for things and so on and so forth. So maybe looking away, but obviously talking into another event or eating or those kinds of things will be problematic. Turning your camera off on Zoom will be okay, because we all have things we need to do. So those are it'll be a little bit different, but it will tighten up what we expect, because it's going to become more and more of a show. So we just want to kind of let people know that and just know that I notice it all the time. Like when anybody does anything other than it's not that I notice like distraction. I'm inherently extremely ADD, so I kind of notice a lot of things all at the same time. So it's problematic to do things that are distracting. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, again, do we consider this the stage? and the lights are on and the audience is there. And so that's
Yes.
the attitude. So
Yeah,
were you
as
to
we're-
walk
as we're-
off
as
the
we're-
stage, that would be noticed. So
Yeah. So that would be, but it is, I mean, we have to remember that right now we're only in front of 100 people, mere 100 people in the room. But think about what you would do if you were sitting on a stage in front of 100 people. Like, that's what you probably want to think of as acceptable to do with what you're doing here, is to think about it. And when that number is 200, 300, 500, just you want to keep in mind, you do want to visualize that many people in a room and you're sitting on a stage when you decide whatever you're going to do in a window. So anyway, that's just a thing to keep in mind. All right, next question.
Next one's coming in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, and he says, "Are the lenses for the Blackmagic Design Pocket Cinema camera 6K the same as the M50, or is that the wrong flavor of EF lens?"
I think they're both the same. Yeah. So I think that you're in the same glass. I believe they're both EF lenses. I don't think that they're different, unless someone can correct me. But I think that they're just both standard EF lenses. Next question.
Next one is JJ McKenna in San Rafael. He says, "People who play games using a keyboard and mouse instead of something like the Xbox controller often enjoy faster response and accuracy. Are there PTZ cameras that allow similar control?"
Definitely, the interface makes a difference with the PTZ. I can definitely tell. It's not so much speed that's the problem. It is smoothness. That's where PTZs really, the controllers really, I think, make a difference. Is that how smooth is your transition from one thing to another, and can you do it organically? I think I told this story a couple times before, but I'll just say it real quickly. I had one where we were having these BRC 900s, these Sonys that we had. And generally, we never cut to them moving because you just never got the controller that Sony gives you is not good. And anyway, I had a person in New York, a contractor, and I looked at the show we were doing, and I was like, did we put a camera operator in the center camera? Because I don't remember hiring one. And they're like, oh no, that's the PTZ. And I'm like, who is doing that? And I walked over, and there's this operator just sitting there, just taking this really bad controller and just totally following it as if it was a physical operator. And I asked him, I was like, how did you learn to do that? Have you ever done this before? And he goes, oh, I've never done PTZ before. I came as a camera operator. You put me on a PTZ, and he said, but I play Xbox, like 4 hours a day, and this controller is so much more powerful than an Xbox controller. So for them, it was a huge step up, and they were able to, and so it's possible to get that out of the system. It's just that most of us don't know how. Go ahead, JJ.
Well, yes, that was my comment the other day when a guy brought up his Xbox controller. For folks who are PC oriented or computer oriented, like having that ability for some mice, you can actually change the DPI temporarily to have a slower DPI and get a really smooth look inside of games, which I don't know if there are PTZs that do that, because that would, to my mind, be much more
the biggest problem is that it's the amount of movement that's translated to the camera movement. You want the bigger the joystick, the better. I mean, if you have a big one moving, like little movement, like so that you can have bigger movements be something that is a small movement over there is where you're going to get the most resolution. And that's why people use, for instance, wheels, where you're turning a wheel to actually do the pan and tilt, because it's going to give you a lot smoother experience. Go ahead, Jonas.
I found that in gaming, with moving with a keyboard, it's more accurate because it only works in one increment. Like there's not like, oh, I run 8 faster. It's like I press these 2 keys, it does exactly what I do, but that's exactly what you don't want with a PTC. And I found it at one point, if you play around with a PTC controller and your mind already mapped hand movements to other movements, it's pretty straightforward to like realize these are the limits. And it's real hard to do that with a mouse or like a keyboard, because it's just, I don't know, for me, gaming, it's just not as easy to map in your head. So there might be something in there just nerve-wise that it's easier to control that versus pressing a button, mapping that to a longer time movement.
Good guy.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to this myself. You can see that this is in vMix. So this is a template that's built into vMix, and the button here on the left is for big moves, and then finite is this one here. And these are all controllable. So in the template, you can actually go in here and you have all of those functions that you can assign to any of these buttons. So you can assign any of these, including the ones that are underneath that's not shown in this diagram, but there's more buttons on some of the controllers that'll specialty ones. So you get a lot of controls. You can assign, a bunch of presets in there. So I think you can be faster here and smoother based on just experience. I'm sure Doug is really good. And this is just vMix. I guess that they use Rockosoft or Mark Roberts control for Jeff Keithley's events. And so there's even more, if the software allows it, there's even more fine tuning. So take a look, not just at vMix, but also Mark Roberts and Rockosoft.
And the other, and also Skarhoy makes a bunch of their own controllers that are actually pretty good. Like the Skarhoy ones are pretty good PTZ controllers. Yeah, you've got one of them there. Do you like that one? I think it's pretty. They've gotten to be much higher quality than they used to be.
Yeah, this thing's expensive though. I mean, this is like $1,400 for this model, but the effect is amazing because with a twist you're zooming in. So they make bigger ones, where you can do two moves at the same time, so you can be zooming, doing a diagonal, which is tough to do. But I'm getting pretty good with this one. It's a lot more just finer control. They call it the Hall effect. You get what you pay for. It's a pricey piece versus the $79 one I got at Best Buy.
I have no idea whether it'll work or not. I've always wanted to take like a really high end flight simulator joystick and just connect it to a PTZ, so I could just sit there and fly the camera. So yeah, not one of those, but that could be kind of interesting. But just like a joystick that you could push down and pull back and forth, I think it could be interesting. Next question.
Next one is coming in from Stefan Fischer in Wurzburg, Germany. And he asks, what are the experience in the use of a gray fabric on a wall instead of a gray painted wall, especially as far as lighting is concerned? Many thanks.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, you picked the right color. Gray's in, and excuse me for swinging this camera around, but I have a gray fabric which does a lot of things. One is it doesn't compete with my ancient cinema displays for color when I'm doing color balancing. It also absorbs noise, and it's also a holding device for holding Velcro. So if you want to patch some, do little audio adjustments by putting a panel in the corner, you can just pop it in there real easily. And if you run out of gray fabric, dogs work well. They're really good on the floor. So all those things are great.
It's great. I've built a lot of gray backgrounds and then used screens for them. The real problem you get into with gray painted walls, what's nice about them is they're just there and they're flat, and I put them oftentimes in the back of everything else I'm doing so that I can always just open it up and it's just going to be a gray wall. Texture becomes an issue. So if you're using a Lycra, so I'm using a Lycra background right now, that Lycra is really easy to get smooth. I will say cloth gray backgrounds is much more difficult in my eyes. It's really hard to get all of the wrinkles out of it in the way that you can get with Lycra. So this one's a pop out. It's a 6x7 pop out background. But with Lycra, what you do is you open it up and you spray it with water and then let it sit, and then it'll just, all the wrinkles will dissipate out of it if it's stretched out. And so I really like that, and it's nice and portable, and you can relatively cheaply put it up. I mean, I have a pop out that's $150, but you can also get ones that you can get cheap, camera cowboy or whatever, ones that are like $18 for a stand, and just pull it tight across that stand, and then the same, you'll have the same effect. And so there's a lot of those things that can be useful. The cloth, again, is really hard to pull tight. So that I will not use cloth. And if you go way back into the old office hours, I was using cloth, and that's why I will not use cloth again. It's because it was almost impossible to get every wrinkle out of it, that's there, and that's something you get with a wall. But what I will say again is that the issue with the wall is texture. You have to sand it a lot and then put lots of coats on to get it to be a super fine. Otherwise, that little bit of texture, actually, you can see it. Sometimes that's good, but especially when you're grazing it with lights, it really micro, like you see it as a texture behind you. And the worst part about that is that it affects your compression. So complex backgrounds affect your compression if you're not careful. So you have to be kind of careful of that as well. So next question.
Next one is Sky Gleason, and he asks, what will you be thankful for next year in 2022's Thanksgiving?
We're projecting. Go ahead, Alex.
I imagine Thanksgiving is about thanking other people, but to be selfish, I am working out what to learn next. And so I want to, this time next year, to have chosen the right things to have learned new. Because I'm in the position where, should I get more into Reality Composer and UCZ? Because 3D modeling sounds like a really heavy thing that's going to take years to learn. Or should I go further into the switching and the other stuff that's associated with live event graphics, or something else completely? I don't know. So I want to be thankful that I chose the right thing to learn, or things.
That's good. John?
I want to be super excited to watch Sky receive his Emmy for Best Producer of the Year award for Matt in the Kitchen.
There you go. Yeah, that's awesome. That's Sky.
I can't even imagine, because a year ago we were just surviving and now we're thriving. And so I kind of don't want to project, to your point, Alex, but at the same time, I want to be accountable and responsible. But so many in the moment things have happened this past year. So I just was curious, because we're a stronger people group. We're stronger individuals, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun year.
Good, Mitchell. Oh, can't hear you.
All right. I want to get a better mute button. But anyhow, other than that, I'm going to be shocked and amazed if you guys still allow me to be here a year from now because of my antics and my craziness. I hope that I don't overstay my welcome. So that's something that I will be thankful for. Yeah, that'd be great. But seriously, folks,
be prepared to be shocked and amazed. I don't think that we don't want
seriously,
you to go anywhere.
Folks, I want to take a deep dive into Cinema 4D. That's something I just sort of grazed the surface of, and I really want to become really good at it.
Yeah, I'm excited to be. I think from what I want to be thankful for is that we're continuing to do this. That my family's healthy. That I'm still in a house. Like I little things like that. So the basics of that. I think that we're going to grow a lot next year. So I'll be thankful for us to survive next year. Like I don't mean to be a worry word, but when you grow a lot, you just have to be very careful of growing too fast. And so there's a lot of folks that want us to, that are excited about what we're doing, that will give us support and so on and so forth. And I think that we just want to, I'm going to be thankful for all the work that everyone goes through and all the patience that everyone has as we figure out how to do the next thing, and as we approach next Thanksgiving, we will be less than a month away from episode 1000. So just to, kind of like, so what we should start thinking about is what happens. I think it's like December 21st or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the date is, but it's somewhere in that 19th, 21st is right around Christmas is the 1000th episode. And so,
and we'll pass Twit on September. We passed Twit.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're,
not that you've thought about it.
I started thinking about it when we hit 500. I was like, when is the next 500? There was something about that had it be, I paid more attention to it now because it is something that is starting to become kind of amazing. Like it's starting to become this thing like, there'll be some point where we've done more episodes than almost anything else out there. I mean, there'll be some in a couple of years from now, there would be like, we will have done this more hours of this than any other show in the world. We're like 2 or 3 years away from that, I think. Because you look at number of hours that we're doing it. So take 2 hours a day, 7 days a week and project it. And that's not even all the extra stuff that we've done and project it. And you end up with more raw hours of doing something than almost anything else out there at some point. Because remember, a lot of them repeat. A lot of them don't do 7 days a week. They do a season. So even if something's been around for 40 seasons, it's only done 20 to 30 episodes per season or whatever. I mean, we're going to be competing against the ones that we have to look at are soap operas that have been doing for 40 years. Like those are the ones that are the most number, but we're kind of a soap opera in a technical sort of way. Novella. Yeah. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, what skills would be most useful for a production infrastructure position similar to what Jonas does?
Go, Jonas.
I think I totally misread that and forgot that there's not a cloud in there, but I'm just gonna put a cloud in there. Being open to learn, being open to be corrected, and just stay calm when everything burns, because you're the one person that people rely on to stay calm when nothing works and find a solution. Working on the spec and using tools like they're meant to be used is one of the things that I learned helps you a lot. And then just reading through a lot of the specs, like read the SRT spec and understand what that means for your production. Where does that add failure points to your infrastructure? Build yourself an infrastructure in your head for example, for Office Hours 2.0. Take that as an example project. Build that out in something like H2R gear, and then write the whole document about what can go wrong. Because I found that's one of the things that I spend most time with is telling people, I know it works right now. I know it will work on a good day. I'm more concerned about it working on the bad days. That's most of the work that I do, is making stuff work even when the day shouldn't be like that.
Yeah, my term for that is oftentimes it works in my head. And that's not me saying that it works. It's me saying when I say it works in my head, it means theoretically it's correct, but I have no idea until I actually do it. Like it works in my head. That's the short version of that, is that we just don't know until we actually do it. And you don't know. Theoretical knowledge is worth 1/10 of practical knowledge. 1/10. Like academic knowledge is not worthless, but very inefficient. What really matters is how it informs practical knowledge, which actually means something. Go ahead, JJ.
Well, I was going to also reflect, since this is about Jonas, having seen how cool he is under fire. Like when we've watched productions just about fail, and Jonas was calm about it because he has the first principles understanding. He's open to new ideas constantly. He accepts criticism and works on those same things, like adds them to his workflow, adds them to his thought process, and then doesn't get stuck on a single technology either. Like doesn't say, oh, this is the solution. Rather says this might be the solution for now, and let's try something else as things improve. So that autodidactic brilliance, I think, is what Jonas carries around with him.
Yeah, and I think that what I've noticed in production over 20 years is the ability to remove the self from the process. When people freak out, they're freaking out because of how they look. Like, I will look bad, it will fail, and that will reflect badly on me. It will do this thing. They're projecting out, and their self is the thing that is making them, when yourself, like how you look or what's going to happen next, or whether you get sued or what, all those other things, when you take that away, you can operate collectively, you collected. You can just keep doing what needs to get done, and a lot of times we get into this thing where people will ask, well, how do you keep working on it? We're like, well, there's no choice. Like, there's no, like, I get to quit or I get to work out. All there is to do is keep working it, and you just keep working it until you hit the ground. Like, if you hit the ground, you were working all the way up until you just hold on to that stick. If you can punch out, then and no one's going to die, then punch out, but if you can't, just going to hold on to that stick until it goes in, and it doesn't help you to yell at it. Like, yelling at the stick isn't going to make it any better, and so the thing that we look for in production are people who, you look at my whole crew that I hire on a day-to-day basis. It's people who stay flat, like things go wrong, and there's just everyone just keeps doing the thing that needs to get done, and they'll just keep working. We've had we've had clients notice that we'll have all kinds of things going wrong, and this team just keeps just kind of keep on pulling things in and everything else, because there's nothing to do other than to keep doing the thing, and so that's the number one production skill in the world. Like, all the other stuff we can train you in, but staying calm is not something it's really hard to train. It's something that's something you have to do yourself. Next question.
Next one's in from Douglas Carmichael, and he asks, would there be any way to reduce the intensity of sunlight coming into a room? I've heard that direct sunlight exposure can yellow plastics quite quickly.
Mitchell?
That's a good idea, Douglas, to do something to reduce the sunlight, but mostly the ultraviolet that's causing that particular problem. But my drapery guy told me that instead of just blocking the sunlight, I'm looking into a window right now, and I'll give you a little shot of it. It's a roll-down drape that acts pretty much as a scrim, but it's an 80% scrim, so I don't lose this great view of the woods behind my studio. And it does the job of cutting out the nasty sunlight that would cause problems, not only on my face, but on all the equipment in here. My face is beyond repair, by the way.
The funny thing is that I only have 2 words: cement blocks. That's the best. If I ever win the lottery and I have a bunch of money, I'm going into the ground. Like, I'm just going to drill. I'm going 4 stories down. Like, there's not going to be any, like, I have no need for windows, because they're just annoying. And which is funny, because my office is all windows. Like, it's like literally all windows around me. It's a little, I don't know what I'm doing. So anyway, but like, as I rebuild it, one of the things I'm doing is blocking all the windows. Like, they're just all going to get turned off, so that I don't have to work on them anymore. So anyway, so that, there's lots of ways of blocking the light. You have to be more specific, because blocking sunlight is easy. Blocking it artfully is hard. Like, Mitchell has blocking it artfully. I have, like, just put something in front of it. Go ahead, Sky.
There's stuff called ND film that you can put up on windows, and that will also cut, just like you have an ND filter on your camera. You can buy this sheets of that, similar to what you would do in a car, like in Arizona, like what Bill would do to break, cut the lens, cut the light a little bit.
Go, JJ.
From a contracting perspective, the E-rated glass is nowadays required here in the state of California, which cuts out more of the UV light. So you still have light, but it doesn't harm your valuables like photos.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Generally, everybody has a shutter that you can just close if you would like to not have sunlight. I found shifting your day into the night and then keeping the shutters closed during the day works pretty well.
Exactly. Just open every once in a while. It does turn out that the sunlight is really good to keep it from developing its own smell. So you have to kind of open it up and let the sunlight clean everything for you, and then make it work. And I open my doors a lot and everything else, but yeah, I do like to keep things kind of closed. So anyway, there's that. And I have cats, and I have built some very specific things to keep the cats out, because I have to put a new door in. The reason the door is still sitting there is I was waiting to make enough money, or have enough extra money, that I keep on spending on office hours to, so every time I had the money to do it, I keep on buying Mac Minis or other things that keep me from buying it. But I have a door jamb, and I really want to put in my living room. If there was a bookcase there, you would have no idea that my office was there. And I so want I've wanted a secret door for, like, since I was like 6. And so I'm going to put a cheap door in here right now, but there's a dream that someday I'm going to have. And I even found the company that makes them and everything else. I just want to be able to pull something down and have it open up and go into my office. I've ruined it now, because all of you who watch on YouTube will know that Alex has a secret door, and they'll just be pulling things all over my bookcases. But I don't have one yet.
You're becoming hopeless. It's just hopeless.
It's the dream. It's the dream. So anyway, as we finish up our hour here, I just want to repeat that I'm so thankful to be with all of you. It's just such an honor, to be with this incredible community. When I opened it up as office hours, I just had no idea what was going to happen. And so it's just, thank you all. Thank you again. I know I thank everybody at the end of the thing, but especially today. Thank you. Thank you to the producers who showed up on a Thanksgiving. Thank you to the panelists who took time out of their Thanksgiving to be here. It does make a difference. I think there's something about it, the fact that we do it every day, rain or shine, that makes a difference, for a lot of people, because not everybody has people to hang out with, and things to think about. And I think that, we provide that every day, for people to be able to be part of something.
611.
611. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. All right. So remember, we're doing that tomorrow. We are going to be just brainstorming about second hours. I'm getting serious about the second hours. So like, just so you know, like, we have, just to give you a sense, next week I'm working on, but the week after, just because next week was a little unknown for me for a variety of reasons, but the week after, we're going to have I'm kind of leaning toward Mondays being a little bit of a wild card, but a lot of times things about office hours. So we're going to do another one of, like, how to get the most out of office hours, and talk about that, and talk about where things are and everything else. Tuesday, we've got Harrison coming in talking about their mix bus. So they're going to break that down for us. Wednesday, neural net. So they're going to come in and talk about their stuff. Thursday, we've got Michael Krasny. And if you're not in San Francisco, Michael Krasny so the second hour is based on Forum, which was a KQED, it's an NPR station here, was based on his show. Like the second hour is based on his show. And he's retired, and so I pinged him and he's like, sure, I'll come on. so anyway, so this guy has done what we do in the second hour. He did that for 30 years. So anyway, so we're going to talk to him about interviewing people and talking about his stuff. And I mean, he is he's the so we want to definitely take advantage of that. And then Friday we have MakerPipe, coming on to show their stuff. What happened was I got so excited about it that I started talking about it, and then all of us started buying MakerPipe, and I was like, I wonder if these guys would just come on. We've already, they didn't know me from anything. Because we were doing so much with it, I figured I'd better see if they can just come on and explain how it works and the history of it. And it's such a great little company. I don't know them at all, other than sending that email to them to say if they'd come on, and they're very responsive. So they're going to come on and talk about MakerPipe. Anyway, but that's the kind of thing that we want to think about. Like, how do we keep that pace going for the rest of the year, the next year? That it's that tight every week. So we want to brainstorm on Friday, and then again, I'm just going to keep reminding you Monday, 2:00 Pacific Standard Time. If you're interested if you have opinions about streaming, it's the time and the day. I can't say more on YouTube, but time and day to be here. So come think about those things, and we'll have a pretty good, interesting talk in After Hours. All right. Speaking of After Hours, I think that it is time for us to jump into it. So here we go.
Happy Turkey Day.